the author of the book, Nayanima. Last month we had the launch of Ajay Bisaria's book on India-Pakistan relations. We are very happy to launch this book on Afghanistan, which is basically a narrative about an Indian lady journalist landing in Afghanistan and what happens and all that. May I welcome Jayant Prasad. He was our ambassador in Kabul some time ago. I now invite Simran to introduce our panel.
We have Nayanima with us today. Nayanima Basu, she's a New Delhi-based journalist who has been covering foreign policy and strategic and security affairs for nearly 2 decades now. She holds a major in history from the University of Delhi and has been professionally associated with several media organizations such as The Hindu, ABP Network, where she currently works, INS, and she has also covered major stories such as the assassination of former Pakistan Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, the global financial recession, among other things. In the course of her reportage, she has also interviewed several key Indian and international political and military figures. We also have with us Ambassador Jayant Prasad, who was Director General, the Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis here in New Delhi. He has served as India's ambassador to Afghanistan, Algeria, Nepal, and the UN Conference on Disarmament in Geneva. In the headquarters in Delhi, he served as Special Secretary in the Public Diplomacy Division. He also headed the Americas and the Multilateral Economic Relations Division. He's also a fellow at the Weatherhead Center for International Affairs in Harvard University, a member of the UN Secretary General's Advisory Body on Disarmament Matters, and a visiting scholar for the Center of Advanced Study of India at the University of Pennsylvania. Before he began his public service career, he was a lecturer in history at St. Stephen's College, and he holds, he went to modern school, St. Stephen's and JNU. Thank you.
Thanks. Before we proceed any further, let us release the book. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
We have some footage of what happened on the 15th of August 2021 in Kabul, and also some photographs taken by Nayanima.
Afghans are thronging to Kabul's airport, desperate to get on planes and leave the country at any cost. They're scaling the airport's walls this morning, rushing in. There's no screening, no security checks, just force of numbers. When they do manage to push aboard planes, they're so crowded, pilots won't take off. And no one agrees to disembark. It's all happening just a few hundred yards from the military side of Kabul airport, now separated by a row of barbed wire from the civilian side, in chaos. The military side is where the U.S. is staging an elaborate evacuation of American diplomats from the embassy. But even here, Afghans managed to push through, willing to cling onto an aircraft as it took off, rather than stay in Afghanistan. Afghans say the Americans are only focused on getting U.S. citizens out, along with some interpreters. although tens of thousands of translators still have no US visas, so they too are left to the Taliban. The militants took control of Kabul yesterday. We watched them move in.
Kabul is falling now. We've just left our office, our longtime home in Afghanistan, and we're heading to a safer location, what we hope will be a safer location. Already we've seen some gunmen who look like Taliban on the streets, and all of the government checkpoints, all the police, all the soldiers, they're gone.
Now the Taliban are out in full force. They took over the presidential palace, occupied Kabul's version of the Oval Office. Afghanistan's president fled the country. The Taliban have set up checkpoints across the Afghan capital, and their Islamist rule is already coming back. This was a popular beauty salon, styling women's hair and makeup. The Taliban banned salons, along with education for women and girls. So when the Taliban came back,
Now they've painted over the beauty shop. People here know what the Taliban want. They know what the Taliban expect.
we watched a man tear up the beauty parlor's sign in line with the Taliban's wishes. The Taliban don't just control Kabul, but the whole country and all the weapons the U.S. bought for the Afghan army. There are also reports of atrocities, including abductions, rape, and executions. The militants are much stronger now than 20 years ago when the U.S. drove them from power when they sheltered Osama bin Laden as he plotted 9/11. Now the Taliban are back as the U.S. leaves Afghanistan gripped by panic and run by extremists.
The Taliban have been taking pot shots at the U.S. transport planes as they leave, and many are drawing comparisons to the U.S. evacuation from Saigon.
All right, Richard Engel in Kabul. Stay safe, and we'll be back with you. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Find your favorite recipes, celebrity
Me?
Yes.
Trying to show some images that I had taken while I was there. I don't know if that will open, but that is me sitting with Gulbuddin Hikmatyar. Getting this interview was quite a challenge, but if you read the book, you will know. Mr. Hikmatyar has his history in himself. He is called the Butcher of Kabul for a reason. It's very rarely that, Indian journalists get to interview him. I was one of them. And this interview, it had a very interesting story. The fact that I had no camera person or a photographer with me. So I was quite worried how to do it in terms of, a video interview. But then this is his studio, by the way. So he has an entire studio set up with 2 huge cameras. I mean, any television studio will feel, it falls short. So this is all his setup, and the mic that you can see is there. I was at that time with the print. So the print mic you can see, but this is all his camera and the shot that, his men has taken this photograph. So this was the day also, while I was interviewing him, it was early Sunday morning on 15th of August. That's when the Taliban also came into the city. And this interview had to be sort of stopped in between because he had to escape, because at that time he had a lot of threats for his life, because he never had good relationship with the Taliban. The rest, it's there in the book for you all to read. Yeah, I guess this will help. Just click on it and open. So that's me holding a bullet shell that was there on the 16th of August at the airport. I had thought that I'll be catching the Air India flight at that day while coming back to India, but that never happened. And so bullets were strewn all across the airport, and that's my suitcase, which never got back. I mean, I could come back, but not this, because this was at the airport, and then I had to go back to the Indian embassy, where they said that, we will check it and give it back to you. But that sort of never happened. I could bring back my pink bag. Thankfully, it had all the equipment, whichever I carried from the print, and I could give them back. But not this. And yes, I mean, you saw the images of the airport at that time. The Taliban was extremely scared on that day, because that was their first day also to manage such a crowd. And the crowd was immense. At least in front of me, I could see at any given point of time, I guess probably 50 persons got shot, all young boys trying to run away from the country, who just thought they could just run to the tarmac and catch a plane. I mean, I can't even imagine the frustration that they were going through, but then that was what it was at that point of time. This was me with a few soldiers of the Afghan Defense Forces. I unfortunately do not know if they're still alive. We still chatted after coming back over WhatsApp, but I don't know what happened to them, because after 2 days from this image, Mazar fell. This is Mazar-e-Sharif in Pule Khumri. This is again at Kabul airport. You can see bloodstains all across. There used to be a watchman here who got shot, I heard the night before. And we were all sitting there and waiting for the flights to land, but then the airport got completely shut down. This was the waiting room that we had, so to say. This was a school in Mazar-e-Sharif where there were young boys and also girls. I'm sure the girls do not come back, but the boys are there, still coming here. But the principal had to escape because he had a threat. The principal, I know, is somewhere outside of Afghanistan now, but his support staff is still managing and running classes till nursery to class 5. This is inside the Blue Mosque of Mazar-e-Sharif. These are the two, you can say, the imams there who told me, who were pretty upset that I was there wearing a flak jacket and a press, that kind of helmet. He said, you have no threat to life. Taliban is amongst us and they're all over here. You can take as many images as you want, let them come inside this country. They are amongst us. So they were pretty okay with the fact that the Taliban is coming in. And I wrote that in my story. Many people got upset. But then that's the reality that was there at that point of time outside of Kabul. This is Ata Noor. He used to be the governor of Balkh province. He's known to have saved Indian diplomats when the Mazar consulate was attacked. He really wanted India to help at that point of time. And he told me in this interview, if India can give us air support, which was actually impossible, but then he had hoped India will save Afghanistan some way or the other from falling back in the hands of Taliban. Thank you.
So it was in those circumstances, a lady reporter from India goes, and the harrowing experience, she is at the Delhi airport because she was in Pakistan before she went to Afghanistan, explaining herself why she's going and all that, and how she spent a week or 10 days. Tell us all about it, Nayanima.
So, this I'm sure many of you must have faced while you have, tried to go out of this country in the immigration counters. My passport was a little fascinating to them because it had Pakistan visa, it has Saudi Arabia visa. So I was a perfect case for them. And now going to Afghanistan for full-time training, so to say. I went to Pakistan before this because I had gone for the Kartarpur corridor inauguration, and Riyadh I was invited for an investment summit, but they would not agree. They said, you will not go and we know what is happening. So they made some calls. Then eventually I told them that, you can Google my name and see whatever I'm doing, where am I getting this so-called training. But then after a lot of wait and everything, they said, okay, you can go, but you know very well that you're not going to come back. I said, okay, thank you for such encouraging words, but that's fine. Just give me the let go this so that I can go. So that's the story behind this. But I guess, as Sir said, it was not really the fact that as a woman I was going there. I wanted to be there as a journalist. That is something that has always appealed to me. I think journalists are losing the flavor of going on the ground, because so much is available now in the internet that we feel we are getting everything by sitting at home or maybe in the office. So, and I'm really sort of grateful for the fact that my previous organization, whom I represented at that time, the print, they agreed at one go. They just said that, if you really want to go there and keep on reporting, do that. But there'll be a time where there could be a breaking point. If you feel so, and if we feel so, we'll call you back. So that's how that had happened. And I guess what I wanted to say through this book is ground reportage will always give you that little edge over others. There are many colleagues of mine who are sitting here who've covered Ukraine war, like I have Kadambini Sharma here. So, we know that how it feels when you're in the ground, and the difference that, if you're sitting here and reporting, constantly looking at other secondary sources. So that was basically the ethos why I wrote this book. And the fact that you really can do anything to have a perception about that, okay, the Taliban is always bad and everything else is good, is also something that I wanted to break the stereotypical notions. So yeah, that's about it. Rest you will know if you read the book.
Thanks, Nayanima. May I now invite Ambassador Jayant Prasad, who was our ambassador in Afghanistan, to tell us about his own experiences while he was posted there and how he looks at the situation in Afghanistan today. Thank you.
Venkat, I don't think I should go in that direction. I should speak about the book. So I think this is a really gripping account. And you arrived there on the 8th, is it?
Yes.
And
Eighth morning.
and you came away on the 17th.
17.
So that means 9 days and 8 nights. So I think it's an important testimony about the critical days in the history of Afghanistan. I have a story to tell. When I went to Afghanistan in 2008, January, I found in the diplomatic corps a Russian diplomat called Zamir Kabulov. And he had been there since 2002. And he had earlier served in Afghanistan during the Soviet intervention and Soviet occupation. And he was one of the last to leave Afghanistan. In between, he worked also for the UN. So I asked him, he was the dean of the diplomatic corps. So outside the officialdom, he was the first person I met. I called on him. And given the kind of relations we have with the Russians, he was very friendly and very open. And so I was encouraged to ask him the question that if the Americans leave, how long will the regime survive? Mind you, this was in 2008, long before the Taliban came back to Kabul. So he thought for a moment and said that when we left in 89, we had Najibullah. And then he counted. He lasted 3 years. He defeated an organized attack helped by the Pakistani armed forces in Jalalabad in 89. And then 3 more years he lasted. But because of infighting, he lost out eventually. So he said not 3 years. Then he said not 3 months. Then he said not 3 weeks. He said at best, maybe 3 days. And what happened in Kabul was quite tragic because it fell in a day or even half a day. I wanted to ask Nayanima, this I was looking for in the book. Do tell us, when do you think the diplomatic community in Kabul and the government in Afghanistan, the Republic of Afghanistan, when did they think that the state was collapsing?
Thank you, sir. Well, I would say, I would not speak about other countries, but I was getting to hear from reports and others who were there, who were attached with several other embassies, who were living in the Serena Hotel where I was in, saying that maybe the Ghani government will be able to have a peace deal with the Taliban, some kind of settlement, power sharing deal. The signal that I got from the Indian embassy is the fact that, again, like others, there should be a deal. It is not possible that the Taliban will just come in like that. But people on the ground were much more aware, and they said that they're already here. It's just a matter of time when they announce their victory. And all these foreign troops, they will, wrap up and leave, and we know what is coming. So that was the thing. I guess it was a huge intelligence failure from all aspects, and also the fact that many embassies, and I would say the diplomatic community, failed in the sense to read what the common man on the road was saying. Many embassies were too much influenced with what the elite in Kabul was talking, right, at that point of time. Activists, people who are also, I would say, journalists from very top media houses there, who kept on saying that it is impossible that the Taliban would come in. But if you just go out of Kabul, talk to the common man there, they would say, no, they're very much here, and it's a matter of time. And that's exactly what had happened.
So one other thing that I was struck by in the book, that a day before the Taliban takeover on the 14th, Ashraf Ghani made a speech. It was a recorded statement, and it was broadcast maybe a few minutes before he boarded the helicopter or aircraft to fly out of Kabul. So that I find really quite bizarre, why he made that statement, because that statement was like Yahya Khan speaking the day after the surrender in Dhaka. It was a similar statement, full of bravado, full of standing and fighting, and full of prevailing over the Taliban. Just to provoke you, I want to ask you, do you think that from the day the Doha Agreement was signed in February 20, the Americans at that point of time itself had decided to hand over Afghanistan to the Taliban?
That's quite a heavy question, sir. But then I believe what I think is true is that when you signed a deal with them, that was the first sort of recognition that you gave them. So to say today that they will not get a technical or formal recognition is, to me, sounds quite farce and hypocritical. The fact that there were not many in the deal, yes, you made them promise a lot of things, but there were not really any kind of mechanism to monitor whether they'll actually stick to those things or not, especially the women's education. I mean, at that time, the picture that was painted to all of us around the world, and especially to the neighbors, is that this is a different Taliban. This is Taliban 2.0, which we all know now is not true. It is acting same as Taliban 1.0. And the fact that I think the Americans at that point really were sort of frustrated and wanted to get out of this mess that they created for 20 years. So I think that was the deal all about. But now to say that we will not recognize them, keep isolating them, I think they are going to invite more danger, so to say, and that impact will be felt by in the immediate neighborhood, I think.
Another, I would say, nugget in the book is that at one point you say that now Afghanistan is a strategic nightmare. And I think the Afghan people have been left to stew in their misery. Venkat, you asked about the current situation. The current situation is a little muddled. There are some positives, strangely, and some negatives. The positives are that certainly the level of violence in Afghanistan is less than what prevailed before the Taliban came in. And that is simply explained by the fact that the trouble in Afghanistan was created by the Taliban. They were the ones who were fomenting terrorism and insurgency. But now, since they are the rulers, there is a modicum of stability. Despite the fact that, I'm saying this despite the fact that in Kandahar, yesterday there was a bombing in which 21 people died. But that was the handiwork, I suppose, of the Islamic State Khorasan. And the government will continue to take action against them. But we were discussing this earlier while having coffee, that there is no question at all that Taliban is going to take action against groups like the TTP. But groups of interest to India, they have conveyed to us that JEM and LET will not be able to use Afghan soil against Indian interests. So the plus is that there is greater security. The plus is that opium cultivation has drastically come down. Although opium trade has not come down. So they have existing stocks which are being cycled and the prices have gone up. So those who are engaging in that trade are making the same amount of money, maybe more. Economically, the country is being mismanaged because there was an outflux of people from Afghanistan several times in the last 30, 40 years. When the communists came in, then a few talented people left. When the Mujahideen came in, then those who were in government, they left. When the Taliban first came in, then those who were working for the Mujahideen government, they left. So our priority was now that since Taliban is a reality, and since practically the whole world and the United Nations, UNAMA office and the EU office is based in Kabul still, we should have some contact with the Taliban. One important consideration for us was that we don't want to repeat the experience that we had after the Mujahideen government came in, because we wound up our consulates and packed up our embassy and left 2-3 years before the Taliban came in 96. So between 1996 and 2001, India was not present in Afghanistan. But 3 years prior to that also, we were not present in Afghanistan. And this was unnatural because there has always been a historical and cultural connect between Afghans and Indians. If you go all over North India, right up to Bengal, there are Pashtun communities here. And there was one Afghan scholar called Hivadmal. He still works closely with former President Karzai. He came to India on an ICCR grant, and he went to Khudabakhsh Library in Patna and all the other libraries in Bhopal, in Aligarh, and so on. And he wrote 2 fat volumes on Pashto language sources in India. And he told me that he found in India more sources about Afghanistan's history in Indian libraries than available in Afghanistan. So that's the connect between India and Afghanistan. And so for a variety of reasons, we decided to open an interest section there. And we were also supplying what we call humanitarian assistance. India has decided to provide some modicum of food security to Afghanistan. So in that process, 50,000 tons of wheat has been supplied. Almost 40,000 went through Pakistan, but Pakistan then closed this transport. So the rest of the quantities have been sent through Chabahar in Iran. Then we sent 40,000 liters of malathion to protect Afghan crops. Then 300 tons of medicine have gone all over Afghanistan. 11,000 kits for OCHA and UNODOC containing relief materials. But if Government of India believes that the connect is between the Indian and Afghan people, which is what we want to keep alive, we have to do more than what we have done, because we have had a very restrictive visa regime. So I'm sure that after the elections, there will be some revision there. Already last year, ICCR and ITEC programs were restarted, but they were restarted online. Students didn't come from Afghanistan to India. So now we have to open up the visas at least to some students to begin with, research scholars like those who are doing PhD, women scholars. We have started granting medical visas, but very few. Those have to be liberalized. And India has been having frank talks with the authorities in Kabul. JP Singh, the Joint Secretary, this was his fourth visit 2 weeks ago. And he has been in touch with other special envoys of Afghanistan from different countries. The US special envoy was here day before yesterday, and yesterday you said that he met probably the FS and JP. So there is a constant traffic of people. We also participate in two important forums, the Moscow format talks, which have not made much headway because they were supposed to lead to an inclusive government in Afghanistan, and the UNSG-led talks, which were last held in Doha about 2 weeks ago, to which Taliban was invited, but they didn't go because there was talk that the UN might appoint a special envoy for Afghanistan. And the government in Kabul doesn't want a special envoy because they say we are a normal country, we don't require any special treatment. So there is also talk of a contact group on Afghanistan to be set up among the international community. And there the UNSG has taken the view that it is the major donors and those who are engaged with Afghanistan today and who intend to remain engaged, they should be in it and they should talk amongst themselves and finalize how the contact group would be shaped and when it could meet. So this is the present situation.
Thank you, Ambassador. We now will have a Q&A session. Those of you who wish to ask a question, kindly raise your hand and wait for a microphone to come to you, and then identify yourself and ask the question. Okay, Sanjay?
Yes, sir. This is Sanjay from Arab News. You mentioned about India's outreach to Afghanistan. Even earlier, when in the first term when Taliban was in power, India engaged Northern Alliance. It kept on engaging Northern Alliance. At least it kept other group in good humor, and civil society groups also remain engaged with India. But after Taliban take over recently, in the second time, India not only denied visa to those who really wanted to take shelter in India, they completely stopped, as we also mentioned, all scholarship, and those who were pursuing education in India, they could not come to finish their education. Many of them are still in limbo. Their career is in doldrums. Sometimes they call me also, what's happening? At the same time, the Northern Alliance, we don't engage with them. They're very critical when you talk to them personally. Even some of the parliamentarians, they speak very critical of India, who were earlier very favorable towards India. So somebody who has been covering Afghanistan for long, I just wonder what's the policy Indian government, what's the thinking behind all these, detachment from Afghanistan. You want to, like, you have earlier 4 consulates. Now you don't want to engage their people, don't provide them any help. So what is thinking, what's according to you, sir, is the thinking of the Indian government? Because this way we are nowhere. We are anyway, we are not a player anyway, but still whatever goodwill we used to have, if you interact with them, it seems that we have lost lots of goodwill.
You are right that there is, despite whatever outreach government is trying to do through these humanitarian supplies, it's not enough. And stopping the visas, Afghans don't understand it, because for them, India was like a second home. And when visa seekers used to come to the embassy, when I was there, Delhi hospitals like Medanta or Max or Fortis are very expensive. So I used to interact with them sometimes and tell them that, look, I am a government servant. When I fall ill, or a member of my family, I don't go to the hospitals that you are going to. Why don't you go to Peshawar? Because some of them just want to get blood tests done, or heart screening done, or stress test done, or something small like that. So they used to say कि हमें उनके पाकिस्तानी इस पे एतबार नहीं है. And they felt nice about coming to India, although it was expensive. So all that has stopped. And I think the reason for stopping it, there are 2 reasons. Firstly, earlier you said we were in contact with, in fact, India was one of 3 countries that supported the Northern Alliance during the time of the first Taliban regime from 1996 to 2001. And India even set up a field hospital for Commander Masood's men in Farkhor on the northern banks of River Oxus. But the NRF is nowhere on the ground in Afghanistan. And the leadership of the Northern Alliance is in complete disarray. They live partly in Turkey, partly in Tajikistan, partly in Uzbekistan. Commander Masood's son keeps going to Paris from time to time, where he meets Western leaders. But there is nothing available on ground. And in Panjshir, which used to be their stronghold, they don't have any fight going on there. There is complete Taliban control. In fact, Taliban have increased their control in the country. It's a very sad thing for the women in Afghanistan. So there is no interlocutor except those Afghans who have managed to go abroad. So at least India, as I see it, at least India is engaged with Afghanistan in a sense. It's not enough. The point you have made is a very valid one. I don't think we can have people-to-people exchanges without people actually meeting each other. So government will have to relent on the visa policy. So let's hope that this happens after elections. That's all that I can say. I'm no longer in government. for the last 10 years. So I don't know exactly what the considerations are. But one explanation that I have heard, which is not a sufficient explanation, is that there is a security angle to it, because Afghan travel papers are quite easy to get. And because of the huge Afghan population which lived in Pakistan, many Afghans have both Pakistani passports and Afghan passports. It's not to say that Pakistan's relations with Afghanistan are very good. That is another story which we were discussing a little earlier. And that's quite fascinating to learn about. But this is the official explanation, that our security agencies are not geared properly to take care of the kind of influx of Afghans which would be expected once normal visa issuing would be done. Because, as you know, India issued free visas to Afghans, except for the processing fee charged by the agency which handled the passports. There was no visa fee as such. So I hope that we learn from what has happened, because there's a lot of growing criticism of the government's action in Afghanistan, among the people of Afghanistan, and also, I dare say, among friends of India in Afghanistan.
Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia.
Thank you very much. I have two questions for the author. You went to Kabul at a very difficult and delicate time, and obviously it was your physical courage and your courage of convictions and your professionalism took you there. And you went there despite several warnings that you received about your safety, etc. How did you handle the challenge? I think as an author of this rare book, you can please share something more. How did you tackle your own, natural sense of apprehension in that extraordinary situation, and yet your desire to perform well as a journalist? And the second related question is, we have heard Ambassador Jayant Prasad explaining what is going on in the various fora, and Mr. JP Singh meeting all these people. But the central issue is, how is international community connecting with this regime when it has not yet fulfilled the commitments that were expected from it about inclusivity and about international terrorism? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Bhatia, for that question. Well, to answer your first question, I still don't know how I managed there. I just flew with the flow, you can say, managed with my stories. I was constantly looking for stories, and that's what I do. That's my profession. And the fact that I wanted to go there, because I think at one point I was fed up to constantly rehash stories from the international press that the Taliban is coming, not coming, they're coming in 6 months, they're coming in 4 months, all those stories you must have also read that the New York Times, Washington Post kept on filing. So I thought I need to go there, and that's how I approached my editor-in-chief, and he agreed. But while I was there, I think what gave me a lot of inspiration is the fact that ordinary Afghans are just so resilient. I mean, it's just not as a matter of saying, I'm saying this. They've taken war as a part of their life. The children there, I was told Kabul will be this world-class city where you'll feel very safe. But the moment I stepped out of the airport, the very first day when I landed on 8th of August, I saw these children, they're hardly of at that time my son's age, 9-10 years, selling boiled eggs, water bottles like this. And they looked very desperate, but then they had this spirit that we will not beg, and then there were this also the Afghan women that I met there in beauty parlors. I made a point to go to the beauty parlors there twice, and that helped me also for sure. But they were so courageous. They said that, yes, the Taliban would come in, and they're very clear about that. And they said that we will still fight and we'll continue with our jobs. I'm in touch with one of them. She's now running her beauty parlor from her flat. She's doing it very secretively. There are many educationists who are there running secret schools for girls there. So all that really helped me a lot in terms of, going about there. Yes, you were right. I did not get a lot of support from the quarters I expected to get, but I got the support, of course, from my family, especially my husband, and then my work. And the fact that my readers supported when I started sending those stories, the way it was read, even the videos, which was so, I thought they were so poor quality because I didn't have a proper professional video journalist with me, but people were viewing all those videos. They were writing to me, so that gave a lot of encouragement. Coming to your second question, I believe you really want to know what we are doing right now and how will we...
All these meetings are leading to what?
Exactly.
Are Taliban giving any accommodation, or we have the world has no resilience, and so they have almost started dealing with them full time?
Very true. I would say so. When they were in power from 1996 to 2001, and from, the time that they are in power now, one big factor that has changed geopolitically is the fact that the role of China. That is also driving a lot of these countries to go and deal indirectly with the Taliban, because the Chinese have really invested hugely there. They have... the way the Chinese operates there with their diplomatic community as if nothing has happened. They keep on a rotational basis, their ambassadors get changed. And so that happens. Even the Taliban is sending their envoy in Beijing. So that is one factor which I think is driving a lot of countries to keep dealing with the Taliban. And also the fact, of course, there is this fear of Afghanistan turning into this terrorist heaven again. You never know, because as Ambassador Prasad rightly said, that the ISKP there is very active, and we see blasts and all these things happening all the time. And the Americans are still, have one specialized Afghanistan unit very much operating there to sort of oversee the counterterrorism efforts of theirs. So I think that is how Afghanistan will be very important. And that era of not dealing with the Taliban at all is gone. And the Taliban is also very desperate to get investments. That is hugely important for them to revive the economy. They are requesting India to resume the projects that we stalled there, and there are some big ticket projects. So that is how we are dealing, and I think we need to have this dialogue. But then what I believe India needs to do right now, or maybe the regional countries, is to again push for an intra-Afghan dialogue, and not just only dealing with the Taliban, and looking at all the quarters that operate, that are in various state of plays. Which is why I think this time, when our Joint Secretary, Pakistan-Afghanistan Division from the MEA went there, he met a point while he meets the Taliban. He also met the former President Hamid Karzai. And I think we are opening all those channels now to see and assess how those things work out. But what I feel personally is the fact that we should reopen at least our consulates that we had, of course, in Kandahar and Mazar-e-Sharif, which were key. Something that will also not be quite favorable for our immediate neighbor, but then those were assets. And if we want to keep our eyes and ears open on that ground, we need to reopen some of the consulates there, is what I feel. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Kishore Babu.
Good day. I am Kishore, editor, World Focus. First of all, congratulations on writing this book. You are a true example of Nari or Durga Shakti. My questions are two. One, the Taliban took over Afghanistan with less of brute power and more of mind power. Their mind control was absolute. And many of the men gave up arms without much of a fight. And number two, the Durand line, which is supposed to be an official line between Pakistan and Afghanistan, which separates the Pakhtuns. How long will that line stand? Culturally, both are the same. How long do you think that line will stand, and the Pakhtuns on both sides will come as one union? Culturally, politically, you can tell me better. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think the Durand line question, sir, will be able to answer much more than me, but that is, of course, one aspect I think will be in times to come between Pakistan and Afghanistan. That is one tension point that will continue to happen. There is no immediate solution, like India never could get an immediate solution with the Chinese, and it goes on. So I think the Durand line will be another LSE for them, which will remain unresolved, but they'll continue to have this skirmishes and tensions. And also, in terms of the fact that, as I said, for India, it needs to closely monitor what is happening on the Durand line aspect. We just can't, close our eyes and say that, okay, let them fight while we enjoy. I think India is now very much assessing that point also, how the relationship between Taliban and Pakistan evolves, and that's how we will take the a cautious approach. And sorry, your first question was?
My first question was that the Taliban want the ground more with mind power and less of brute power.
Yes, you are right. There was this is one takeover that had happened after 20 years of war without any bloodshed, in the sense, not in Kabul. But the way the provinces were falling one after another, right from January 2021 and even before, I think the international community really thought that what will, this bunch of ragtag soldiers be able to do? But I think that was the biggest mistake. As I said, that was a collective intelligence failure to think that they'll not be able to, take over Kabul, which I think should have not happened, because these are the very Taliban who sort of sat across the table with the Americans and negotiated a Doha deal. That was an eye-opener enough in February 2020 to understand how smart they have become. And the fact that I think for the world, it took a lot of time to realize that the Americans, their war on terror was not really against the Taliban, it was against Al-Qaeda. And that very fact got blurred somewhere down the line, and they kept on pushing money and soldiers. And the American soldiers, the way they lost their lives, and trillions of dollars have gone. There is this investigation going on. Washington Post had run this, classified documents. They've done stories out of that. There have been interviews. Cigar has done that. Somewhere down the line, the Americans forgot what was their strategy actually. Was it to really hunt down the Al-Qaeda and finally kill Osama bin Laden, or really hunt the Taliban down, right? So I guess in that measure, they really wanted to hand it back to them. That, okay, this is your country, go run whatever you want to do. But I guess what you said, that was a mind game to tell the world that we've changed. We are now headquartered in Doha. We are this changed characters, which I would say is somewhat true, because I have, I was there on the ground, and I was stopped by a group of at least 50 Taliban men before entering our Indian embassy in Kabul, which is in an enclosed area. And those boys, they were like, again, I mean, any one of us will look at them and say, oh, this ragtag soldier. But they had grenade launchers on their shoulder, casually on their shoulders, and rifles. And they spoke such immense good English. That was eye-opener for me, When I came back and I wrote all that, I got a lot of, I was told majorly to say that, okay, look at this lady. But that's what the reality is, and that is precisely why I wanted to go there. They spoke such good English, it is unimaginable. I showed them some of the WhatsApp chats that I had with some of their leaders in Doha. Of course, I interviewed them later on, like their international spokesperson, Suhail Shaheen. I said that, listen, he knows me very well, so don't think I'm a spy or whatever that you are thinking. So he said, okay, you are allowed to go inside, but then just walk straight through and don't look back. The moment you look back, we'll hit you. So I said, okay. And the way he, in that 5 minutes, the way he dealt with me and the negotiating power that they had, yes, of course, that was a mind game. And that was like 1.5 kilometers walk from the main gate to our Indian embassy there. It's in a pocket, in a corner of a colony. And he kept on saying, the moment you look back, I'll shoot you. So just keep walking straight and enter the embassy. And that's how it happened. So that's when I realized they really know how to deal with them. And the fact that I told them that even if you kill me, what is it that you'll achieve? You've killed one Indian journalist, whom nobody really knows it'll not give you any leverage, no headlines you'll get. So, better let me go. So I think today's Taliban is a much smarter Taliban. They know how to also effectively leverage the social media. Look at the way they tweet. Look at the way they issue their readouts, like this readout when they issued this time when our JP Singh was there from the MEA. The MEA statement was just 4-5 lines at best, but their statement was huge. And they very clearly mentioned that you need to give visas to the Afghans. Let the patients come, let the students come. So yes, this is the same old Taliban in terms of their operations, but this is a much smarter Taliban.
Ambassador Prasad, would you have anything to say about the Durand Lane?
I think two things. One is that, Nayanima, you have yourself mentioned the testimony of Mark Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He said that after fighting 20 years, in the broader sense, the war was lost. And he said this after he retired in 23. So about your question on the Durand Line, I recall, after I retired, there were a lot of so-called track 2 meetings where I befriended a Pakistani who was ambassador in Delhi and then later went as ambassador to Kabul as the Pakistani ambassador to the first Taliban regime. So he told me that once his foreign minister had come to Kabul, and then they both flew down to Kandahar to talk to Amirul Momineen, Mullah Omar, about settling the Durand Line. That Afghanistan, being a fraternal country of Pakistan, must accept the Durand Line. So the foreign minister made his pitch. Aziz Ahmad Khan said nothing. He was just witness to it. And this is what he told me. Mullah Omar listened to him and then he said, "You should be ashamed of yourself. You are a brother and you are talking about division of land. There is never raise this topic with me again." So this is the situation. No Afghan Pashtun leader is going to accept the Durand Line de jure. But de facto, it is a line. And Pakistan has managed to build a wall and barbed wire, put barbed wire on it for much of it. So it's going to exist in reality, but it will be a bone of contention between Pakistan and Afghanistan for a long time to come.
Thank you.
And they don't have the happiest of relations, and this relates, Ambassador Bhatia, to your question about what is happening to an inclusive government. Friends of Afghanistan are now getting frustrated. Zamir Kabulov, who is now the Russian special envoy, he's frustrated. The Pakistanis are frustrated. And the Pakistanis are the ones who cobbled this government together. If you recall the early days after the Taliban takeover, the ISI chief went to Kabul and he got the interim government together and some kind of a coalition was formed. The second thing to note is that within the Taliban, there are now differences. And surprisingly, the differences are based on the age profile. The younger leaders in the Taliban, they are not Taliban too, but they just happen to be young, like Mullah Omar's son, Yaqub, who is the defense minister, like even this dreaded terrorist, Siraj Haqqani, who is the interior minister. Incidentally, the Afghan cabinet is full of quite notorious personalities. 5 of them are under the UN sanctions list. 3 of them are former inmates of Guantanamo Bay, but they are in power today. And one of the the Afghan government has two major grouses with the international community. And this is to answer your question. One is that all these people should be taken off the sanctions list. And the second is that the Afghan government money, which is lying abroad, should be restituted to them. But neither of these two things are going to happen unless there is some move towards gender rights being restored and an inclusive and permanent government in office. Because another thing that I noticed, Nayanima, which was very good, that you have mentioned that this is a government which runs on decrees from Kandahar and cabinet decisions in Kabul without a constitution. So this will lead to a situation where no country other than China and maybe the Qataris, no other country will be in a hurry to recognize the regime in Kabul until they change.
Thank you. Mahendra Ved.
Yeah, first of all,
It's an understatement when you say that you retired 10 years ago.
hearty congratulations to Nayanima for this book. I was keen to attend. I was away, but I was lucky to get an early flight. That's why I'm here and happy to be here. Okay, my question is a bit of past, a bit of future. Doha Agreement, everybody knew was a flawed agreement, signed in February 2020. And from May onwards that year, Taliban were covering each territory, district after district, province after province, and they were at the gates of Kabul. Was the world community so naive as to believe that they could not come? And did the American last Secretary of State, he has gone on record that they leaned on the last president, and he simply did not agree to work with Taliban. And then we all know that he flew out. So how did the world community as a whole accept this kind of situation, hoping against hope that Taliban will not come? And the future part is for both of you to answer. And that is, what is the future? Do Taliban remain politically and diplomatically pariahs, but everybody, including India, does business with them? Thank you.
To answer your first question, sir, I believe, firstly, thank you for your good words on my book. But, the international community maybe knew that they are getting power after signing the Doha deal. But there was parallelly, the intra-Afghan dialogue was also going on, right, in Doha itself, for which at that point, the National Reconciliator, Dr. Abdullah, was constantly going in and out of Kabul and Doha. And we were getting to hear that, yes, a lot of ground is being prepared and the Doha deal is almost ready. The intra-Afghan dialogue will have some power sharing agreement. At least that's what was being fed to the international media. Nobody actually went inside those meetings and covered them. There were probably a handful of them. So the fact that I believe there was this hope maybe that there'll be some deal that will happen, and somewhere down the line, the Americans, no matter what they are saying, they'll continue to operate from there and keep giving support to the Afghan forces, which eventually didn't happen. And that's how we saw how everything collapsed. And also the fact that, as Ambassador Prasad said, there was a lot of hope with the Ghani government. President Ghani himself kept on giving these messages. He kept on dealing with the fact, and he kept on saying that, if there is an event as such, I'll be ready to share the power with Taliban. But then the way he sort of escaped, that also came as a shock to many, I would say, including India. Dealing with the Taliban, again, I guess today there is no option but to deal with them. But at the same time, I believe, and that goes for, of course, for India, that you need to do this proper balancing act that we are so proudly these days talking about. I think when you are dealing with the Taliban, you need to also ensure that, what is happening to your people-to-people linkages, which was, the mainstay of this relationship, always. We did not let the students come in who had got scholarships through ICCR. Their 2 good academic years are gone. Not all of them can do online classes. It's not possible at all at a scenario where they're operating in. And rural Afghanistan, I mean, it's not possible in a place like Delhi. Then forget about remote Kandahar, where a girl would be sitting, or maybe a boy would be sitting doing online classes, taking online classes. So I guess we need to give them the visas. We need to give the medical visas. We need to go back, as Ambassador Prasad said, maybe after elections, to keep giving the visas. If we have reopened the embassy, we might as well start giving those. The e-visa that we suddenly started at that point of time, I remember after coming back, till I think even now people write to me that, our passports, the Indian embassy was taking passports from Afghans till 13th of August, 2021, without knowing what will happen to them. And then 16th of August, everybody left. Their passports remained there. It might have fallen in the hands of Taliban. Nobody knows. It might have been burnt. But they were passports of common, ordinary, innocent Afghans. They never got those passports back. And I had 2, 3 girls writing to me constantly that, please help me do something. So, all those things will continue to haunt me. But then I think this is the time, after elections, maybe we should do some course correction. The goodwill that I saw myself there, not just taking name of Shah Rukh Khan, but otherwise also, they knew very well, as Ambassador Prasad said, that they believe India is their second home. They actually believe like that. Because at the night when I was stuck in Mazar, the airport sort of shut down at that point of time. They said the Taliban is coming in. And my flight was 7 hours late, but finally, thanks to calm air, we could come back to Kabul. But I was sitting with this 15, 16 young girls and boys, and all those details are there in my book. Is the first thing this girl told me, why did you shut down the embassy, the consulate in Mazar? This was the only place I thought, I have a friend, I can go. I want to study in India. And so at that, and that was 12th of August or maybe 11th August, she said, I'm going to Kabul because from Kabul, I'll apply for my visa and I'll go to India. She had a clear plan. I don't know where she is now. We did exchange numbers, but then we know what had happened. I don't know where she is, but I keep writing to her. So that hope that they still had, even the youngsters, India is always there beside us. I think a high time we regain that before it is too late.
You want to add anything, Ambassador?
Not much to add, but you are quite right about what happened at Doha. The Afghan government was completely blindsided. And Khalilzad, who was the US envoy, he was grilled in the US Senate about a month ago. And he said that it was never the US intention to give priority to getting a settlement before the agreement to pull out American troops was finalized. So both the Taliban and the Americans had the same objective, which is the pullout of US forces. So it was very easy for them to reach an agreement. And all this business of intra-Afghan dialogue, etc., was just an add-on for the public. So nothing came of it. What is going to happen in the future? Hard to say right now, because the future of the government in Kabul will be determined by the cohesiveness or otherwise of the Taliban. The Taliban itself can destroy itself. Right now, I don't see any other force which is going to destroy them. The second thing which is interesting is that the government has no money. But despite that, and World Bank stopped funding the linking up of the power stations and the grid connectivity which was required to import Kyrgyz and Tajik electricity into Kabul under the CASA 1000. So they had a huge program in collaboration with the ADB, but when Taliban took over, World Bank stopped the assistance. Now the Taliban government has resumed building the lines, transmission lines, on their own strength from the customs that they collect, because trade is going on with Iran, with Pakistan, even with India for that matter, through Chabahar. And the second thing is that the Afghans say that they are willing also to move on TAPI, which is the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline. Now that we ourselves are very unsure, but the Afghans are quite determined, and their share in the TAPI gas will be less than 5%, but they gain a lot by being the transit country. So this hope that the regional countries have of having Afghanistan as a kind of crossroads or thoroughfare between Central Asia and South Asia, that hope somehow seems to be still alive. But my own feeling is that Afghanistan, even under the Taliban, might be willing, but Pakistan will not be willing. I think we'll keep it for another day because that would take the focus away from the book.
Yeah, sir. I have two questions, one for Nayanima ma'am and one for you. So, luckily, I was in Kabul and Swat Valley in 2001. So, when I was in Telka, do you think that the ambassador Afghan river could be the next Indian weapons for Pakistan? This is the questions for you. And Nayanima ma'am, the Afghanistan rivers could be the new Indian weapons against Pakistan. And Nayanima ma'am, what you saw in Kabul, Kandahar, and what is the real picture of the rural life, basically the women life in right now in Afghanistan? Because I talked one journalist, she told me that what you have seen in Kandahar or Kabul, that is not the real picture about the women education in the rural village of Afghanistan.
About your question, I can categorically say that there is absolutely no chance of Indian weapons being given to Afghanistan to be used against Pakistan. Because in the last 20 years, we were very careful with our assistance program, and we made sure that we did a lot for the Afghan National Army and the ANDSF, and we trained their officers in India, and we gave a few helicopters which were not manufactured in India but in Russia. But I take you back in history. In 1973, after President Daoud took over, he was very keen to absolutely erase the Durand Line. And he proposed to India at that time that you help us, and like a nutcracker from two sides, we will crush the nut in between. And we need your help. You don't have to fight, we'll do the fighting. But India said no, because there is no end to opening and reopening of the borders once they are settled, however unjustly they have been settled. And that has been India's position on India's borders. So India cannot take a different position on the Durand Line. And so the categoric answer to your question is that I don't see that eventuality.
Coming to your question on rural women, well, I mean, I couldn't go till Kandahar, but of course I was in Mazar-e-Sharif, and where I met a lot of rural women at that point of time, who were all, their heads covered, roaming with their husbands in the Blue Mosque area and shopping. Later on, what had happened, and I know that for a fact because the cab driver that I had in Mazar-e-Sharif, who also had an AK-47 to protect me, so to say, and that's how they operate there. He eventually got kidnapped, I know, and then his wife is now, the local Taliban leaders, they keep coming to all their houses, and the wives are made to cook food for them, so that is one sort of image that I'm telling you from Mazar-e-Sharif. I know from some of my acquaintances there that there are the secret schools also happening in rural Afghanistan where women are getting education. But what we don't really study a lot and get to hear also from the media, because now the media is there very much under the control of the Taliban, is even the boys who are getting education, it's not that they're getting educated based on the modern curriculum. They are also being now fed in the kind of education that the Taliban wants to give. And the schools are not modern schools anymore. That's a bigger worry, that even if the boys are getting education till higher education, they're not getting the education that was given under the Republic. So that's the situation right now, if you ask me, sociologically. And women, I guess, always bear the brunt of whatever happens. But then for rural women in Afghanistan, it was always tragic, I would say, and it'll continue to be so, because some of their husbands who really did service, let's say for the Americans, or otherwise who used to do earn livelihood in a different manner, they are facing a lot of trouble at this point of time. But then, yes, I mean, that's what the situation is. I mean, I would also bring in the fact that, in November last year, I was in Iran. I was being invited, globally, all women journalists, many women journalists were invited, and from India, I was the one. I saw in Iran also, you have this strict rules for women, especially the headscarf. But there, the women are encouraged to get educated till the level of PhD. All the women who were there that I dealt with, that I met in Iran, I was there in Mashhad, I was there in Tehran. They told me that, yes, headscarf is a problem with some of them who are protesting. But at the same time, the Iranian government believes that women needs to be also educated, which is something I thought, I wish the Taliban really someday, probably learn from Iran. I don't know. So that's my answer.
The last question, Simran.
So I wanted to ask you, Ambassador Prasad, do you feel, when the Taliban 2.0, which we call them famously now, or used to call them, they came, the biggest critique was the human rights record. And we still see the human rights, the way they're treating women especially. My question to you is that, do you feel that the world has kind of moved on? We've had the Ukraine conflict now. We see what is happening in Gaza. Do you feel that the fact that the world today is more focused on, say, Gaza and Ukraine, and that is giving the Taliban a perfect opportunity to just do what they want when it comes, especially, I would say, to the treatment of women and human rights? Do you feel they are using that opportunity? And do you feel that the international community will ever focus back on Afghanistan the way it used to before?
I think that's a smart way of looking at the situation, because the world attention is certainly not on Afghanistan. And the world has turned away from Afghanistan. And the rest of the world, NATO countries, for example, were in Afghanistan only because the Americans were there. And once the Americans decided to leave, they had no interest of remaining there. So I think those who will be interested in Afghanistan will now only be the neighbors of Afghanistan. And there will be greater responsibility on them. But I see a very dark phase ahead for women in Afghanistan, because the Taliban regime is misogynistic, is anti-women in a sense. And even if there is a little bit of tokenism in forming some kind of an inclusive permanent government in order to get what the Afghan government wants to get from the international community, which is recognition. I don't think they are going to relent easily on women for the simple reason that the Kandahar leaders, led by the current chief of the Taliban, Hibayatullah, they have tightened their grip on power. So when in the clerics conference in Kabul about a year ago, the two younger leaders, Siraj Haqqani and Mullah Yaqub, raised this point that we should pay attention to international opinion. That is the only time Hibayatullah spoke in that meeting. He basically asked them to shut up and said that we know how to run Afghanistan and don't talk about what you are talking now. So after that, for the whole of the last year, I have not detected any sign whatsoever that the Taliban are going to fulfill the promise they made the day after they took over, that they will relent on gender rights.
May I now invite Dr. Awad to propose a vote of thanks.
Thank you, Mr. President. I need to make an observation before I put the vote of thanks, being Kabul and Afghanistan have been also an area of where I have been covering it since 2000 and 2001, before the fall of Taliban and after the fall of Taliban. And I was in Khushabauddin when I was captured there, and I was detained for 3 days by the North Alliance because Ahmad Shah Massoud was killed in the same day where I was in the same compound, and they thought I was an Arab journalist, and I was the only Arab journalist there. Having said that, I just wanted to focus on one point, that after spending $1 trillion to topple the Taliban, and after that we see the Taliban. So what lesson do we learn from South Asia? I think there are questions to be addressed. These are the questions I always raise it in many occasions. The second point, the opium. The opium story, which we have done lots of story on that, and I have traveled extensively in Afghanistan. During the Taliban, according to UN narcotic agencies, the amount of production reduced to 25%. But when the American came, it became 400%. Let's think seriously what lesson India can learn from Afghanistan. These are the issues we have to address, exactly what happened, why they have to interfere in a country. The cultural difference that you see affected the people without understanding what's happening in Afghanistan. And I've seen the woman in Khushabauddin, I've seen the woman in Mazar Sharif, I've seen women in Kabul, and when it falls, it's the same style, lifestyle, but maybe they have different harsh measures they have been applying it. That's what the Taliban are. Anyway, there's the story. We will have it some other time. I just wanted to thank Basu for bringing all these issues back. She brought back all good memory for me. I know I haven't read the book yet, but I'm sure I will be one who will read it extensively, and I will be more focusing on the future of Afghanistan, which is all of us of our concern. Ambassador Prasad have added lots of points in this topic, and we have enjoyed your input extensively. I'm sure you have educated us with many of the points which I have really raised also in my life living in South Asia. And we thank you for being part of our FCC and joining us in this discussion. And I thank all the audience for being with us here in this occasion. Thank you very much, and join us for tea and privilege. Thank you.
Yeah. The book is available for sale at a discount, and the author will be very happy to autograph it for you. May I now invite Simran to propose mementos to Nayanima and Ambassador Prasad.